Long before modern voices shouted for women's freedom. Long before the papers printed their opinions and pundits filled the air with assumptions. Islam had already written her liberation into its sacred text. In a world where baby girls were buried out of shame, where women were counted among possessions rather than people, Islam came as a thunderclap of justice. It was not quiet. It was not hesitant. It was bold and unapologetic, lifting the girl child from the dirt and placing her in the light of honor. The first heartbeat of her rights began not in a courtroom, not in a rally, but in divine revelation. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer spoken about. She was spoken to. When the Qur'an descended, it addressed her directly. She was given inheritance when others were denied it. She was given the right to choose her partner, to reject him, to own land, to manage wealth. She was granted the space to ask, to answer, to think, to dream. In an age where the world debated whether she had a soul, Islam declared her soul sacred. That wasn't a small shift. It was a revolution of the spirit. This protection was not given out of pity. It was not born of modern philosophies. It was a divine act of restoration, calling back to the original dignity planted in the first woman ever created. She was never designed to be less. She was never meant to be a second thought. The Creator who fashioned her from love and soul, from strength and softness, also built a system to guard that essence, and so Islam became her defender, not through slogans but through structure, not through sentiment, but through sacred law. The headlines today try to convince the world otherwise. They twist culture into creed, they blend ignorance with belief, and paint the picture with unfair hands. But those who seek truth beyond the noise will see that the heart of Islam does not beat against women, it beats with them. It shields her when the world wants to strip her bare. It defends her when societies seek to silence or expose her. It uplifts her not because she shouts, but because she stands. And oh, how she stands! You see, a woman in Islam walks through the world with an invisible crown. It is not visible to everyone, but those who know. It is a crown of dignity, a crown of spiritual strength. She does not lower her eyes because she is weak. She does so because her soul is focused on higher things. She does not hide her body because she is ashamed. She does so because she values what the world tries to cheapen. She is not behind because she is less capable. She is beside, always beside, and sometimes ahead, quietly leading with grace. When you hear the noise, listen harder for the truth. Listen for the verses that speak to her honor. Listen to the footsteps of women who narrated hadith, who led armies of knowledge, who raised generations of scholars and thinkers. Listen to the silence between the lines, the space Islam carved out where she could be whole, not half of someone else but complete in herself. She is not a shadow, she is the sun, and when she rises the world has no choice but to feel her light. That is not just history, that is her truth, that is her right, that is her Islam. The veil, so often misunderstood, so frequently misrepresented, is not a chain but a choice, an armor, not a cage. It is the fabric of dignity draped with devotion. The world may see cloth, the woman wearing it sees clarity. It is not weakness that makes her cover, but strength that empowers her to do so. Her hijab is not her silence, it is her statement, a statement that says, I define myself, I answer to no one but the one who created me. My worth is not measured by the curves of my body, but by the depth of my mind and the purity of my heart. The world has a strange habit. It mistakes modesty for oppression, and choice for coercion. It assumes that a woman who covers herself is being silenced when in truth, she may be speaking louder than the rest. She is saying no to the commodification of her beauty. She is saying no to the lie that freedom comes only when everything is exposed. She is saying yes to a divine command that holds her as sacred, not for the eyes of all but for the soul of one. She is not hidden because she is ashamed. She is not shielded because she is less. She wears her veil the way a warrior wears armor, not because she is afraid but because she is prepared. She steps into a world that often sees her as strange, that misjudges her intentions, that questions her intellect, that doubts her agency, and yet she walks anyway, with grace, with pride, with the quiet knowing that she does not have to bare her skin to be seen, because her essence, her faith, and her purpose shine brighter than any spotlight ever could. Let it be known, her veil is not a wall, it is a window into her values. It is a filter between her and the forces that try to reduce her to parts. It is a reminder to the world and to herself that she is not here to entertain, to conform or to impress. She is here to fulfill her calling, to serve her Lord, and to stand as a testament to the truth that women can choose modesty and be powerful at the same time. It is often said that the veil is a symbol of submission, and yes it is, but not to men, not to society, not to culture.
It is submission to something greater, something higher, submission to the will of the Almighty, who gave her honor not in spite of her modesty but because of it. Her head is covered, but her mind is wide open. Her body is concealed, but her soul is illuminated. When the world tells her to be bold by being bare, she smiles. She already is bold, for she dares to live by values that don't change with fashion. She already is fearless, for she faces stares, sneers and stereotypes every day, and still walks with her back straight. She already is revolutionary, for she disrupts the system that says a woman's power lies in her appeal. She refuses that lie. She breaks that mold. She reclaims what was always hers, the right to define herself on her terms. So when you see her, don't pity her, don't question her, don't speak for her. She knows exactly what she's doing. That veil you see is not a curtain hiding her. It's a banner declaring her strength, her faith, her sovereignty. The world may not understand her, but that is fine. She was never meant to fit into it. She was meant to stand out, to rise above, to walk her own path, clothed not just in cloth but in courage. She is not behind, never was, and never will be. The idea that she walks in the shadow of a man is not rooted in truth, it is rooted in ignorance. In Islam, a woman is not a footnote in history. She is the ink that wrote chapters of legacy. She is not a follower in silence, she is a voice that echoed through time. When the world says she is late, Islam reminds her she was always early. When the world says she is absent, Islam opens its books and shows her name written bold and clear. Take a moment and walk through history's quiet corridors. You will find Khadijah, not waiting for her name to be called, but already standing at the front, a woman of wealth, intellect and integrity, a woman who proposed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because she saw in him what the world had not yet recognized. She wasn't behind him, she was beside him, supporting, financing, and encouraging the earliest call of Islam, when few dared to listen. She believed when others doubted, she gave when others withheld, she stood firm when others walked away. Her strength was not borrowed, it was built, brick by brick on her own merit. And then you will see Aisha, not just as a wife of the Prophet ﷺ, but as a scholar, a teacher, a narrator of hadith, whose knowledge became the foundation of Islamic understanding for generations. She debated, she corrected, she enlightened. Her mind was a lantern that lit the way for seekers of truth. She didn't shrink herself to please society, she expanded her voice to serve humanity. Her presence in Islamic scholarship was not tolerated, it was celebrated. Her words were not dismissed, they were preserved. Then there is Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, whose light earned her the title leader of the women of paradise. She was not a silent daughter tucked away in a corner, she was a force of spiritual strength, a symbol of patience, purity, and perseverance. In her lived the quiet fire of resilience, the nobility of lineage, and the softness that does not break under the weight of grief. She walked with the grace of her father's teachings, and the strength of her mother's soul, and from her blood came the lineage of leaders and martyrs. Islam never told women to walk behind. It told them to walk with purpose. It didn't ask them to shrink, it asked them to shine. Their contributions weren't side notes, they were pillars. They weren't confined to the home, but they also weren't forced into the streets. They were given a choice, and that choice was sacred. They prayed in mosques, they fought in battles, they traded in markets, they served in courts, not because they had to prove themselves, but because they were already proven. Today, when the narrative tries to erase their roles, tries to paint Muslim women as passive, the truth roars louder than the headlines. Muslim women have always been active agents of change, vessels of knowledge, beacons of strength. They didn't need to compete with men, they complemented them. Islam never reduced a woman to being lesser, it raised her to be equal in value, unique in role and unmatched in grace. So no, she is not behind, she is beside, and sometimes she is ahead, leading with the wisdom of Khadijah, the intellect of Aisha, the heart of Fatima. She walks through time not as a shadow, but as a sunbeam, bright, warm and necessary. Her worth is not in comparison to man, it is in obedience to the one who created her. Islam doesn't silence her steps, it sanctifies them. And wherever she walks, she leaves behind footprints that history will always remember. The strength of a woman in Islam does not roar with rebellion, it stands firm with resilience. She does not need to flip tables to be heard, nor burn banners to be seen. Her power does not come from defiance, it rises from deep, unwavering dignity. While the world often teaches that strength is loud, Islam teaches that true strength can be silent, that quiet perseverance, that enduring patience, that ability to remain rooted in faith while everything around her storms, that is her power. In every test, every hardship, every limitation placed before her, she does not crumble. She bends perhaps like a branch in heavy wind, but never breaks. Her soul is trained not to flee from difficulty, but to rise within it. She is not waiting for a world to hand her her rights because she already knows they've been handed down from above, from the Lord who shaped her with purpose, who breathed into her soul, who honored her with responsibilities and dignity. She carries her rights not like a weapon, but like a birthmark, undeniable and divine. Islam gave her these rights not as a favor, but as a recognition. The right to speak, to testify, to earn, to learn, to own, to choose, to lead. She is not bound by a system of man's making. Her system is built by the most merciful, who knows her better than she knows herself. She does not look to temporary approval, to shifting opinions. She looks to eternal truth, to promises written not in ink, but in revelation. When she is wronged, she is not left alone. Islam does not abandon her. Islam rises for her. It commands justice for her. It holds her oppressors accountable, not just in the courts of men, but in the court of the hereafter. If a man dishonors her, he does not just commit a sin against her, he commits a sin against his Lord. If society neglects her voice, Islam reminds the world that the Prophet ﷺ himself paused to listen to the voice of a woman who brought her complaints to God. Her pain is not invisible, her tears are not wasted, her silence is not weakness, it is often a prayer louder than speech. Her resilience is not an accident, it is molded by the examples of women before her. Look to Maryam, the mother of Jesus, who stood alone under the weight of miracles and slander, who never raised her voice in anger, but raised her soul in trust. Look to Hajar, who ran between the hills of Safa and Marwa, desperate for water, for hope, for life. Her footsteps became ritual, her struggle became sacred. That is what Islam does. It turns the striving of women into sacred legacy. So when the world says she must shout to be heard, she knows better. She chooses the path of depth, not drama, of impact, not impression. Her strength is in her prayers at night when no one is watching. Her courage is in her patience with injustice. Her empowerment is not a slogan, it is submission to the most just, the most wise. There is nothing weak about her softness. There is nothing passive about her patience. She is a mountain that does not move, a river that flows around every stone, a flame that does not flicker, even in the winds of mockery or misjudgment. Her strength lies not in fighting against the roles God gave her, but in embodying them with pride, wisdom and purpose. She is not rebellious because she doesn't need to be. She is rooted. She is steady. She is strong in the way that only faith can make a person strong. Her story is not one of tragedy. It is one of triumph, misread and misunderstood. The world has tried to write her tale with the ink of assumption, painting her as oppressed, voiceless and broken. But the truth is, the woman in Islam is none of these things. She is not a victim of her faith. She is a victor through it. Her faith doesn't confine her, it refines her. Her religion doesn't erase her, it elevates her. What the world sees as limitation is often liberation in its purest form. The tragedy is not her reality, it is the world's refusal to see it. She does not need saving from Islam. She needs the world to stop distorting it. The headlines take pieces of her life, remove the context, twist the intent, and package it as proof of her oppression. But the truth is deeper, the truth is brighter, the truth is hers. It lives in her eyes when she raises them in prayer. It breathes in her strength as she raises children, knowledge and communities. It echoes in her silence, in her patience, in her refusal to be anything less than what her Lord made her to be. She walks through a world that misunderstands her, yet she walks anyway, with her head high, with her heart firm, and her steps steady. Her confidence does not come from the approval of others. It comes from the one who crafted her soul and declared her honored. In a world that sells validation through visibility, she chooses to be hidden, not because she is afraid but because she is precious. In a world that says show more to be seen, she answers, I am seen by the one who matters most. That is not tragedy. That is truth wrapped in faith. Islam does not celebrate her for what she looks like, but for who she is. Not for how she pleases people, but for how she pleases her Creator. She is not a trend. She is not an object. She is a believer, a servant, a human being with divine rights written into Scripture, not scribbled in legal loopholes. Her inheritance, her education, her marriage, her freedom, these are not modern achievements. They were granted to her over 1400 years ago, when the rest of the world was still deciding whether she even had a soul. Her triumph lies in her legacy, in the women who came before her, who taught, led, healed, fought, prayed and sacrificed. Their stories were not written in ink, but etched in the hearts of nations. Their strength was not loud but lasting. Their legacy is not forgotten. It is carried in every Muslim woman who knows her worth, who embraces her identity, who wears her faith not as a burden, but as a badge of honor. Let them say what they will. Let them write their stories. But the truth is still hers. She doesn't need the world to understand her to feel empowered. She doesn't need the media to agree with her to know she is right. She knows who she is. She knows where she stands. And she knows that her story, though often misread by the world, is written perfectly by the one who created her. So don't call her a tragedy. Don't call her a symbol of suffering. Call her what she is, a survivor, a believer, a woman of unwavering faith. She is not what the headlines say. She is what the heavens say. And that truth, no matter how misread, no matter how misrepresented, will always be hers to carry, with pride, with peace, and with power.